So today is Saturday, February 26th, and it's the third day of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Now, people in the United States do not seem to understand what is going on insofar as Russia's invasion is concerned, because they keep saying that Russia is failing, which is the weirdest comment. Russia is failing because Russia hasn't taken out the infrastructure of Ukraine, hasn't hit the electrical grid, hasn't destroyed the cell phone towers or the water supply or something like that. It's just remarkable. They keep insisting that the Russians seem to advance and then retreat whenever they meet any resistance. And it's just a failure of imagination on the part of so many American commentators that they do not seem to understand what Russia is really doing with this invasion. Because you see, the American mode of war is to go to a country and destroy everything. Destroy the electrical grid, cell towers, the water supply system, everything. Just destroy the whole thing and then roll in. That's not fighting a war. That's just mopping up the total annihilation of a country. And the United States has done this repeatedly in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, or they semi-tried to do it in Syria. I mean, it's really kind of like a despicable way of making war, right? But what are the Russians doing? Well, see, the Russians, they don't want to destroy Ukraine. No, they don't want to destroy it at all. What they want to do is they want to capture it intact, see? And they don't want to hurt the civilians. Why would they? From their point of view, if they harm civilians, they just create enemies. And so they want to capture Ukraine, change the political leadership of Ukraine, and install a political leadership that is sympathetic to Russia's security needs and is going to be a long-term ally. But they don't want to alienate the Ukrainian population. Because if they alienate the Ukrainian population, well, the Ukrainian population will eventually overthrow this puppet regime. And the Russians want to install a puppet regime. Let's not pretend otherwise. But they want to install a puppet regime whereby the Ukrainian citizens are more or less indifferent to it. They don't want to install a puppet regime after having made the lives of Ukrainians so miserable. So that's why they don't want to destroy Ukraine or harm the Ukrainian populace. They want to capture Ukraine intact, change the political leadership, and then let it go. Of course, because they don't want to manage Ukraine. They don't want it to be a burden on them. They don't want that long term. And so what are they doing? They are rapidly invading the whole country, and everybody concedes that they're moving very, very quickly. But they're not hitting any civilian infrastructure. They're only hitting military targets. And they are relentless in hitting the military targets, but always with a certain degree of caution. And I'll explain why in just a moment. But they're hitting military targets. They are avoiding civilian populations and civilian infrastructure. And when they go to a city or a destination, when they encounter any resistance from the Ukrainian army, any serious resistance, they stop and pull back. Because what are they doing? They are encircling. That's their whole strategy. And it's very simple. And if you look at a map, you'd realize it. What the Russians are doing is that whenever they go to a major city like Kiev, like Kharkov, and soon enough they're going to be in Dnipro, when they get to those cities, they go up to those cities and they meet some resistance and then they pull back. And they allow their forces to start to surround it. That's the strategy they're employing in Kiev. That's the strategy that they're employing in Kharkov. They are encircling these cities. And once they've completely encircled them, what will they do? They'll wait. That's what they'll do. See, if you surround a city, all you have to do is just wait around. Eventually it'll fall, of course. And so the Russians are systematically surrounding all of the major cities. And whenever they come across a smaller town or village, They just advance and cover it and capture it and move on and continue with their advance. Whenever they meet any kind of serious resistance, they stop, pull back, and then encircle. One of the things that they want to capture intact, and people don't seem to realize this, but it's very obvious if you think about it, they are trying to capture the Ukrainian army. That's not why there hasn't been any major battles with, hundreds or thousands of casualties. It's been light skirmishes. For all intents and purposes, the Russian army is tiptoeing into Ukraine. Insofar as air power is concerned, the Russians in the first 3 hours wiped the Ukrainian skies of everything. The Russians own the Ukrainian skies. Any plane flying is Russian. But insofar as their army is concerned, this isn't World War II. This isn't a World War II where the Russian armies were kissing cousins of the Mongol hordes. You know what I'm saying? No, this is the modern Russian army that has the goal of capturing intact Ukraine and the Ukrainian army. Because the Russians realize that once they have captured Ukraine and changed the political leadership, they will need an army to protect and look after the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian land. They don't want to destroy the Ukrainian army. They could do that if they wanted to. They would have done that already. They own the skies over Ukraine. Their goal is to capture Ukraine, capture the Ukrainian army with as little casualties as possible to the Ukrainian army. And that's why whenever they come up against serious Ukrainian resistance, they keep consistently pulling back. And in the West, this is interpreted as the Russians are weak, which is so weird. It's like the Russians are so weak, they're not advancing as fast. That is a separate issue that I'm going to get to in just a moment. But the Russians are so weak because they're not obliterating the Ukrainian army. Because that's what the Americans do. They obliterate anything that crosses their path. Friend or foe, they don't really care. But the Russians do care. That's why they're not obliterating the Ukrainian army when they could. A friend of mine, Alex Christoforou, in the Duran, great show, he pointed out something that I'd never considered, which is very obvious. He pointed out the fact that, you see, the current Ukrainian leadership in the military, the generals in Ukraine, they went to military academies with the generals of the Russian armies. They're drinking buddies since when they were back in 18-year-old, 19-year-old plebes. They know each other. They don't want to kill each other. Of course not. You've got some buddy when you were drinking out when you were 18, right? Do you want to kill him? No, you could be on opposing sides of whatever contest, but you don't want to hurt him. Of course not. You'll be pissed off at him maybe, but you don't want to kill him. The Russian army doesn't want to destroy the Ukrainian army. They could have done it already in these 3 days of combat. Once the Russians owned the skies over Ukraine, they could have done whatever they wanted with the Ukrainian army. They could have annihilated it, just blown it to smithereens and blown away the entire population of Ukraine if they wanted to. They could cause a major, major humanitarian crisis if they wanted to, and they obviously don't. How do I know this? Because they haven't done it. They have had the opportunity for 3 days to do it, and they haven't done it. I'm doing this stupid video from a hotel room in downtown Kiev, and I'm going to upload it to the internet. Do you think I'd be able to do it if the Russians were really serious about conquering Ukraine? They want to capture it. Understand that. And understand that you in the West, you are being goaded into thinking that Putin and the Russians are like evil Antichrist. You don't understand why the Russians are invading. And your political leadership, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, all these people, they don't want you to understand. Of course not. They want you to just demonize, just to take the easy way out. They want you to imagine that this is a Marvel comic book movie And that, there are white hats and black hats, good guys and bad guys. Yeah, we gotta kill the bad guys because we're the good guys. Yeah. It's so naive. The Russians don't want to harm Ukraine. They would have destroyed Ukraine if they wanted to. But they don't. They want to capture it in one piece. Now, you can say that Russia's motivations are this, that, the other. It doesn't matter. You have to look at the practical reality that is taking place now.